Welcome, I'm Ken Pugh. This session is an experiment in acceptance test-driven development, behavior-driven development. I met the participants who are from Tryg, a Norwegian insurance company, for the first time at this video meeting. We launched directly into creating scenarios for one of their stories. There was no prequel that introduced the concepts such as discovery or formulation or the various types of scenarios. So everything came up in the context of their story. The time period was limited to about 1 hour, although there was a little overrun. So here you can experience a BDD ATDD session and compare it to your own experiences. The video is unedited, so you can see all the stops, the starts, delays, and the feedback that went on. I do have a companion summary video that shows just the outcomes of this ATDD session with a little editing and a bit more explanation. Have fun. So could we just go around and just introduce yourselves and let me know what you do as part of the team? I'll let you self-pick and we'll figure out, see if you can self-sequence yourselves.
Okay, who would like to start?
You started.
Yes, yeah, I can do that. Hello, my name is Martina. I'm the product owner of this team. Yeah, so I create user stories, check with the different stakeholders what we need, check with customers, get customer feedback to check what the customer needs, and yeah, create user stories and keep track of the backlog. Yeah, and what we're going to do next.
Okay. I am Tone. I am architect and developer. The team.
Yeah, I'm Johannes. I'm supposedly a developer in the team, but this is my first day. So I have not been, I've been mostly a problem so far.
An investment.
Investment, hopefully.
I am Janne, and I'm a test manager and also a tester in the team.
Thank you.
And I'm Marcus. I'm a developer.
Yes, I can go. My name is Robin, and I'm also working as a developer on the team.
My name is Lisbeth. I'm a business analyst and also quite new to the team.
Thank you.
I'm Enes, and I'm an automation tester in BDD.
I'm told I'm a technical test analyst or tech lead.
Tech lead, thank you. Else? Carl?
Yes, I am Carl, and I'm a test developer, just like Enes.
Okay.
Pretty?
Yeah. Hi, Preeti, and I work as a developer.
Thank you. Okay.
And Shruti,
Anybody?
would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh,
yes,
me?
Hi. Hi, I'm the Scrum Master for the team. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Great.
Okay. We got everybody? Okay. So I'm Ken Pugh. My specialty, my focus is on acceptance test driven development, behavior driven development. And what we're going to do today is take the couple of stories that you have and see how we can approach them using BDD ATDD to see if we can pick up many of the details of the requirements, or to see if we've captured, excuse me, some instances that we could capture ahead of time. Because the more information you have ahead of time of all the possible scenarios and everything, the more that you can work and be able to check that your implementation is actually matching those expectations. So normally this is part of like a 2-day class, but this is what I'm kind of calling an experiment to see if we can pick up those principles and some of the practices in simply just 1 hour. Okay. So now, any questions before we start?
No.
Okay. And thank you for showing your faces, because it's much easier to see lots of this or this than trying to tell that from simply a set of initials. So let me just start and share a screen here. All right.
You have access to everything, right?
This what?
You have access to everything? We don't
I have.
Yeah.
I have in an email, I have your stuff, and I put some of that stuff into a document here. And
Just
so,
have access, Martina. So if you added anything.
No, I don't have access to your stuff. So let me pick up. Let me start with just sharing the first one that we're going to talk about. Okay. And so your first story you gave me was search for a chassis number to find the detail on a car when buying the car insurance. Currently, we can only search for the registration number, and somewhere there's a match in the national registry between that registration number and the chassis number. So we ought to get the registration number back. And then, of course, once you have the registration number, then you can pull up exactly the same information that you would as if you just had the registration number. So that the story?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I am going to actually share a different screen so that I can get just a slightly different picture here, because I always like to start with what I call is a context diagram, just so that we pick up everything. And okay, so this is a context diagram. I know it doesn't look too fancy. I don't need stuff too fancy. But what we have here is, and we'll just take out the fill here. We've got your application. And we've got an input to it, and output, and anything else it communicates with. So for the example here, it looks like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, we have a user over here that's going to send some piece of information into it. Obviously, the entire set of data that's needed for the application, but then they're going to communicate with something else. Your national database. Okay, of your automobile database. Okay, so now this is going to be, in fact, not just the one way. You're going to send something out, and get something back. So it's going to be a two-way. And just over here, this will also be sort of a two-way thing. Information in and get information back out again. All right. So our user is sending information into our system, i.e. a request for a quote, and getting that quote back. Let me ask this. Is the only other thing that your application does is it needs to communicate with a national automobile database? Is there any other database that, any other system that it has to talk to in order to be able to fulfill that application? That request.
Maybe the vehicle service, Tuna?
Yeah, but that is, we have many other systems we integrate with for this story, because we already have an integration for that vehicle service. So we do have a lookup for registration number. So the change now is that the user should be able to put in the chassis number instead. So the integration is in place and the service is done in another part. So we've done that already. So what's left is the user interface.
Is the user side. But let me ask this. So you've got your national vehicle database. Let me just check to make sure that it looked like somebody was asking to be coming in. Well, maybe they've gotten in. Do you have a test double for that national vehicle database? Something that your test can talk to?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can manipulate that test double, put whatever vehicles you want onto it and get the information back out. So you have a test double that you have complete control over.
Yep.
Okay. So now let's look at your story. We're going to search by chassis number. Okay. Given we are filling out an application,
I think you need to open the other screen if you're supposed
oh,
to.
sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got too many. Okay. So we're going to search by the chassis number. Oh, let me ask that. I'm going to just start before I get into the, that is, we have a term chassis number. What are valid chassis numbers? Does a chassis number have some format to it?
Yes.
What's it look like?
It has, I think, is it 19 or 17 digits and letters. Let me just find one. For example, it could be, should I just write it or should I maybe add it to the chat?
Add it to the chat.
Yeah, okay, then I need to find it a different place. So 1 moment.
Oh, no problem. So we have 17 digits or maybe 19 digits.
We have. I think it is 17. I just tried counting them, but yeah.
17 or 19?
Do it an easy way.
That's okay. It's a detail that we can always fix later on, if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me just I've got enough whatever letters in there.
Here it is. Let me just. Do we have a chat here?
Yeah, you have a chat. Up at the top.
Not visible. Does anybody else have it?
No, I don't think we have there.
Oh.
Okay.
As guests, you may not have chat available to you. Sorry. Anyway, okay. We'll just go ahead and without the detail, because sometimes you get hung up on the details.
Yeah.
That's 15 JKLM.
But it is 17 digits, so that's
okay.
correct. Or letters and digits together.
Letters and digits.
Yeah.
And there may be some sort of a thing associated with them. Okay. So now we have a domain term chassis number.
Mm-hmm.
And we have examples of valid and invalid chassis numbers. So that we know at the user interface level what sort of checks we should do before we go into our program itself. There's no sense in looking up a 16-digit chassis number if it really requires 17 digits or it has to have a particular combination of letters and everything. Okay. So we've got our domain term and we would have the equivalent. We have an equivalent scenario for registration number as well, but you already would have had that for a previous excuse me, a scenario. And now we could talk about valid registration numbers, but we will not get into that detail. Yeah, have exactly the same thing there. Okay. So when filling out an application, when the user searches for chassis number, then the result is registration number. And we'll just keep that one simple. So registration numbers. Value, valid, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So now here's a way to analyze a given when then. When I look at a result, that result, those values in that result have got to come from somewhere. They've either got to come from the given, the when, or a business rule. Okay. So now I'm going to just make this line it up slightly differently. So we have the registration number and we have a chassis number. What else needs to be true so that we can get that registration number?
There needs to be a connection, right?
There, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I think somebody else should respond to this, but I think there needs to be a connection with a valid number.
Yep, so there needs to be a connection with a valid number so that our national vehicle database contains something that has a chassis number and a registration number. And okay, we'll line those up. So is that all we want?
Can I ask a small question here?
Yeah.
To know whether when searching for chassis numbers, will that always result in a registration number? Because I'm not sure if the registration number always will, no, the chassis number always will have an associated registration number, because the registration number is not ready yet, or yeah.
Yes, that can happen for new cars, for example, but that's another scenario. What we're covering in the first round is when we get the match. So it could be a possibility that we do not get any data.
Yep.
Even if it's a legal chassis number.
Right. So you've just given me a second scenario. What if the chassis number is not found?
I think it was registration number not found.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, chassis number not associated with registration number. Thank you. Oh man, we were just talking about whether simple things turn out to be, maybe they're more complicated. So in here, so it would look something like that, right? That the chassis number is on the database, but there's no associated registration number for it. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, perhaps in this case, we might, and there's a matter of whether we want to combine scenarios or not combine scenarios. I tend to go, we're already doing something, we have a scenario. What else should we say? And maybe we need to display that a message. No registration number associated with that chassis number. Maybe you show the detailed message. Maybe you just give a summary of what the message is. But there we go. We know that we have the instance when it's not associated with a registration number. So there's number 2. But then you gave me number 3. Chassis number not found.
But I guess it's the registration number not found, the scenario, right? What's this? No, okay. This is the third one. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and this one, you're looking for the chassis number, but the user typed it in wrong. Got the right format, but then they got the right format, but it's not on the database whatsoever. And in fact, we probably don't even need the then result is on this. We could take it off on both of these. It's simply, we could just say then display okay. Have we covered all the possibilities?
I have a question. What about registration numbers? No, chassis numbers on cars that have been wrecked or stolen or so that's another. I don't know if that's relevant in this case, but just asking.
Will it be found then, Kjetil? Is it able to search for wrecked cars, chassis number, or is it deleted from the system? Or does it still exist like for a while?
I'm not sure. I would guess that it would still exist, since this is kind of what identifies the car. But it could be that identifier will be the VIN number or something, but I don't know much about that one. I'm not sure.
Okay, now brings up an interesting point. Are you responsible for the data in the national database to make sure that these actually represent a car, or are you just a user of that database?
Just the user.
So your concern is valid to make sure, but that would be a concern of the database maintainers, not your concern. I mean, but the assumption would be, and we can make we could add that in here, that if we get a match that it represents a real vehicle. In fact, we can just, in fact, put that assumption in here.
Yeah, I think maybe the concern can be that somebody tries to register or a car that is already wrecked, and that may or may not be some possibilities for fraud.
Oh, okay. So we now have a question. What if a user tries to register a vehicle that is already wrecked? We're now doing what's called, many people, discovery, trying to come up with some more of the possibilities here. I'm going to leave it to my product owner to say, well, what should we do? How do we know it's already wrecked? Should we worry about this? Is there other cases? In fact, that's almost a story almost feature in itself as opposed to part of the story. But let me ask the product owner, should we worry about this or not?
Is there any information in the database regarding this? Do we know that? If it's wrecked or stolen, or is it just you can search for any car? Because I see your point, Kjetil, in regards to what did you say? The vitvasking?
Fraud.
Fraud.
Svindel.
Yeah.
Because I know that if you search for a registration number and the car is wrecked, I think that will give an error message and it would not be able.
Yeah. So then we have the information in the database most likely.
Yeah, but that's if you search for the, yeah, most likely, yes.
Yes, so then I don't think it's a scenario for us, as you said previously.
I'm not sure what you meant by that we have the information.
But we don't, when we do a search for registration number, we do not validate the vehicles we find in any way for that kind of information.
So that we need to do that. We need to add that. We need to.
If we get it at all, I'm not sure. I have never seen that. I haven't looked for it either, but okay, that's a new story.
Yeah, it is.
For the status of a vehicle. Okay. New story.
Yeah, because what you said, Kjetil, is that we do it today, so there must be some sort of validation available if we do it today. Or information we can use.
Today, Kjetil, I don't think we do it today in PBN. Kjetil, do you know if it's really done today?
I'm not completely sure, but I know that it would be strange if we don't do it, because if you search in Lookout for a vehicle or in TFF on a registration number and the car is wrecked, the information there is given. It gets information that the vehicle is stolen or wrecked or something like that. So I know that it's possible to get. It would be strange if a customer, were able to register a car that is stolen, for example. That if we don't have any, it's strange if we don't have any checks on that one.
Okay, so we'll leave that one up there but checking for the status, because obviously once you get the registration number back, you're going to go through the same process if you were just searching by registration number. So, but let me ask this. We've got one more thing here. And that is, what about you are unable, hold on a second, Mike. You are unable to reach the National Vehicle Database.
Yeah. It's a valid one. It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes.
Oh, it doesn't happen that often, but I'll tell you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was once doing this check. I was getting on an airplane. I wanted to check whether my hotel reservation, I couldn't remember which of the two hotels, and it came back and it said, you don't have any reservations.
Yeah.
And I went, what? And it was obvious for a brief little period, they couldn't reach the reservation database. I was not a happy camper. Okay, so we have vehicle, national vehicle database unavailable. And this, of course, would even apply to your registration number itself. You probably want to say like, you want to give some thing saying, oh, we had an error, try again, or do you want to tell the user why you want to try again? Or what should the user do if they're searching and the national vehicle database is unavailable?
Because I guess there could be two scenarios here. It could be a minor glitch, like something happened and then you need to search again, like, and it will show the result, or it could be down for like hours.
Yep.
Because of an issue. So we should have a message like either for both or something. Yeah.
But we don't know if it's a glitch. So
yeah,
it's not possible to distinguish that anyway. So what we do today on registration number lookup is say call us or try again later.
Yeah.
Okay. Call us or try again later.
Can I ask one last question from me? We have this, I'm not sure if we still have generic error messages for several different cases in for example, PIA now. How do we solve this question about specific error messages, and if it's possible to get specific error messages, and also the maintenance of these? Or is that not relevant?
I guess it depends. Like the error messages you're referring to, Kjetil, is different scenarios, right? It's not related to only this.
Yeah, different. Yeah, it's a general.
Yeah, so then we need to we could differentiate them and add specific error messages. But in this scenario here, I think it's okay to have one. But for the other scenarios that I think you're thinking of, yeah, that's something we need to look into to see if we can make them more specific, or if it's, yeah, sorry, Tona.
Thinking as a customer, I do not need to know if it's Loketo that's down or our internal database that's down. I don't care. No. Something is wrong.
Yeah, I agree, but I was just thinking about, will we give specific error messages regarding vehicles stolen or wrong format, or different different scenarios regarding the status of the car and or registration number.
Okay. Yeah. So you brought up an interesting point here, and you're going to have a lot of errors because of things that can go wrong, some of which you can tell the user, i.e. are they errors that the user can fix, or are there errors that the user can't fix? Obviously, you know, a chassis number incorrect, yeah, or the bad format, the user should be able to correct that. If you've got what I suggest sometimes, if you start to get lots of little error messages, what we'd like to do is maybe create this domain term error message. And in that first column, we'd say, here's what the error is. This is the error that the program internally says. So it's like the programmatic error. And then you list the message or the action that the program should do, and you can put any notes if you wish on top of this. So that now you have an entire set of, here are all the possible errors that can occur. Here are the messages that we're going to see on the screen. And now you've got at least a traceability, if you will. If you wanted to use the same message for 5 errors, that's perfectly fine. But at least you got a more detail of what really was happening inside and what was the response outside. Now, if you've only got 1 or 2 errors, then having such a database doesn't make, you know, much, or a domain term like this doesn't make much sense. But having it, if you've got a whole set of errors, now we've we're creating a scenario where we're saying, here's the application errors, and here's what we want a response to be. You're almost making up what's called an event map, if you will. So let me ask this. Have we covered all the scenarios that you can think of at the moment?
We have cases where the car is an unwanted risk.
Is the car is not
car that we would not like to insure? That is also a full stop to the customer. But I guess we should retrieve the registration number and present it together with the message, full stop message to the customer.
Yeah, what if this car is a lorry, for example?
Okay. So now let me ask this. On this story here, we've searched for chassis and we've gotten back a registration number, which we then can apply. Will we get all the information back when we search for a registration number? Will we get that same information back with a chassis number, or all we're doing is getting the registration number back?
We get the exact same data as if the user put in the registration number, but now we're expanding it so that user can put in chassis, but it's one search and we get everything regarding
and you get everything back. Okay. So let me ask, so now on here, when we fill out and we have, I'm going to call it a happy path, in fact, you probably already have a scenario that does this. Oopsie daisy, I didn't want to do that. Where'd we go? So now we could have insert a column. We could have model. Let's call it or make. And that would be a Ford and a model. Okay. Transit. Okay, and so forth. And whatever information you have. Okay, so now we're going to split up the scenario into 2 things. Here we have a search that returns the values in the database. registration number, make, model, and so forth and so on. And now you have a scenario. Determine whether to insure. And our given for that part is going to be given registration of, let's call it just vehicle, is this. When determining
Can I ask you one more
Yeah.
stupid question?
Yeah.
What if this is a car that you are going to import from, let's say, Germany, and you say that you've gotten the information about the car and chassis number and so on from the car dealer in Germany, but it has a German registration number.
Oh, so it's not in your database.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't that simply do that same thing, that the chassis number is not found?
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. So the result is insure. And the answer is yes.
Ken, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that all these scenarios that you're defining are within the scope of the JIRA and that they don't overstep their bounds?
In the scope of the, well, you do have acceptance criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And these scenarios are going to be, in fact, more detailed than that acceptance criteria. And so the issue comes if you took a scenario here, like determining whether to insure or not. This sounds like it's out of scope of this story, but you should be able to find this scenario when you do the registration lookup story, if that makes sense. In other words, if you start to create a scenario like this about whether we insure it or not, you go, oh, I think we already have that scenario. And you go back and you look at the associated story and you go, yep, we have this scenario already in there. Let's not repeat it here. But if we didn't have this scenario back there, well, now that means that we were incomplete for that story. Let's take this scenario and put it back in there and, finish off that previous story. So the scenarios are going to exist in some story or associated with something. It's only a matter of whether they exist in the previous associated one or in the current one. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Now, for the example on this one, whether insure or not, yeah, that's a biggie. In fact, that's what I call a business rule. And this is one place, and it's good we actually do this. This is one place where, especially with financial or insurance or anything else, we're going to have lots of business rules. Determining whether to insure. You already, I'm going to suggest, have this somewhere, but I'm going to just put in just a one that looks like this. We have a should ensure and vehicle data determine whether to insure or not. And now I'm going to bring this all down here. Second. I'm going to add or five. In fact, we probably don't need the registration number in here. We just need the vehicle information. So we're going to have let's see, a Chevy, and we'll call it a Camaro. And you decided, no, we're not going to insure it, or we might have a VW microbus. And you go actuary. Or we'll go review, something like that. Okay, so now what do we have here? Given this vehicle data, we determine whether to insure it or not. And boy, we can add in all the data that you need in there. This could be a heavy-duty table that contains lots of lines. You can break it into smaller tables and everything as needed. And I have a whole another talk on how to take tables and simplify them. I'm not sure we got enough time here left for that. But the idea is somebody needs to basically fill out this table. Yeah, we're going to insure that one. No, not, oh, nope, that one we're going to review to, we're going to have an actuary say whether we should do it or not. Now you've got that business rule. And notice there's a couple of interesting parts about this business rule. A, it does not contain any state. It's really just a, given these values, what should the output be? Which means that it could just drive, from the developer's point of view, a single method, or maybe a complicated method, or definitely just the single class. And now all of that data is basically going to be utilized, and we'll check that class to make sure that it's returning back the right information to insure it or not insure it. And then what we see up above in determine whether to insure is a flow that says, as part of this flow, I got this vehicle data. I'm going to call this business rule, and I'm going to get a result back. Now, this business rule should already be existing for your registration only stuff, but this business rule is completely usable by our chassis version. It's exactly the same data that we're going to give to it. So eking out things like this business rule or business rules is an important part of doing our scenarios or our ATDDBDD. Do you have, let me ask this, do you have something that looks like this right now?
You mean business rules? Or,
Yeah, like something like this business rule, basically.
yeah, I guess we have that as the URM rules. Tona.
It will be exactly the same rules as they put in registration number. So we have something working for it, but what we don't have is it written up in a good way like this. So it's kind of, yeah, we have it, but those that wrote it, that it's not longer here. So we don't really know anymore without investigation what exact the rules are. But yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Tona?
Mm-hmm.
Regarding, I'm not sure how we determine or what calls we do to determine if a car is, for example, not wanted, uønsket risiko, and how it's done in salgsnøkkel. What I know is that in salgsnøkkel we are not able to search for chassis numbers. How when we make this get these results from based on the chassis number, is that kind of we use some of the rules that we have existing rules regarding uønsket risiko and so on?
No, we just get the data and the rules is on our side. So we might not have the same rules set as they do. But we have rules. There are written rules for a search for registration number.
Yeah.
So
but
if you put in a registration number and trust it, it should be the same result. You can ensure it or not.
But do we need to change something in salgsnøkkel to get this to work in PR?
No.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question? If I was to summarize everything we have talked about now and actually write a story and acceptance criteria, what are typical mistakes we do when we write a story? Is it possible to be too complicated, not enough information? What do I need to think of when I write a story?
Oh, well, you've named two of them. Complicated and insufficient information. So when you have a story, and there's our this story up front. Okay. One of the first things to do is start to think of what are all the possible conditions that this story would apply to. And that, for example, in this case, what if the user tries to register the vehicle that's already wrecked? And it's good to come up with those ideas, and some of them you might say, not in scope of this story. No, we shouldn't have to worry about this. And we can also list the assumptions, like the match represents a real vehicle. If we get a match back, it is a real vehicle. It isn't a fake one. So that's what I'd start with. Looking and just coming out with a list of potential scenarios. And the second thing is, so if you, and you may not come out with all the potential scenarios, so that's okay. The more you can come up with in advance, the more you can say, nope, this is not part of this. Yes, this is part of this. Because missing those additional scenarios, coming and going, okay, I think I've got everything, and missing the scenario, oh, what about that? And that having to go back and change all your existing code to meet that new scenario. Yeah, it's doable, but it does represent a bit of waste. So I look at trying to come up with all the possible alternatives, and you'll never get them all, but the more you can, the better. And then actually being able to come up with some data, okay? Like this search by chassis number. Give me the data that I'm going to come back with. Now, the issue comes, oh, this result shows me 300 items of data. You don't have to list them all, but what you want to do is show that data, which is important in making more decisions. So for example, here, our result is registration number, make, and a model. Well, do we need the weight of the car in determining whether to insure it? Well, okay, we better show the weight of the car because that's needed in our business rule of whether to insure or not. So the second thing is making sure that you have the data that you need, and eliminate the data you don't need. So we're concentrating on those things that are required to make our decisions or to go along. So those would be the two most important points. But the third is, and we already got into this, if you come up with a scenario, excuse me, and you come up with a scenario and you go, yeah, this should have been taken care of. Go back to that other story and look and go, was it taken care of or not? And if it wasn't taken care of, well, then we need to add it to this story as well and make sure that both places actually still pass that. So coming up with all the alternatives, making sure you can have the data you need in the scenario itself so everybody understands how the flow of the information and calculations are, and then making sure that you don't duplicate scenarios that have already been done for you.
I
Did
have
that
a
answer your
question.
what? Excuse me?
A question.
Yeah.
Who would you say is responsible for this? Should the entire team do it, or it seems?
Oh. What I typically suggest is that there ought to be 3 people, a minimum of 3 people involved. The customer, i.e. the product owner, business analyst, who understand the requirements, the developer who needs to understand the requirements, and a tester to see if there are all these other possibilities that need to be tested. So we have the group of 3. This group that we have here, I think we got 13 people. I'm going to call it, that's a bit large to iron out this detail. But what I would suggest is this group of 3 irons it out. Finds that, well, what is it, 17 or 19 digits or so forth, or what have you, and then presents to the group as a whole, here's what we're doing. Here's the way it appears, here's the way it looks. And I'm going to suggest that basically the group can go, well, and be a reviewer, and they can go, yeah, what about this? Maybe they catch one more thing that the group of 3 doesn't, or maybe there comes an anomaly that the group of 3 went, yeah, I think we all agree on this, but we really need the entire team to be able to understand the scenarios. because they may have to be maintaining the stuff later on. And at least in the beginning, we'd like to make sure that the scenarios make sense. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So, we've gone through it. We actually had 2 stories, but it
A little, can I ask a small question to Tone or whatever? Do we need a whole chassis number to find a car, or could it be okay with fewer digits, like, for example, the last 9? Just a question, because 17 digits gives quite large scope or a possibility for wrong user input.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. If the chassis number is 17 digits and they're going to be inputting it, that's what you got. That's what you got to have. I would, on all of these scenarios, I would use the real looking data. Okay. The registration number, if it's 10 digits long or combination, put that, not 1, 2, 3, 4. If that vehicle identification number, the VIN number, oh, and I know that's a horrendous one, that's like 30 digits long. If it's 30 digits long, put 30 digits in the thing. Make these scenarios look like the real thing. Don't make them like, oh, okay, we'll just put 1, 2, 3 in there.
Yeah.
The only reason I use 1 through 5 is so we didn't spend time figuring out what a legal registration number is.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what I actually meant, because in real life, when a customer service gets a chassis number from the customer, we usually just ask for the last 9. So that's why I asked if it was possible to get the sum result from fewer digits.
Oh, now we have a different scenario. In other words, you're only asking for 9 digits, the last 9, and you're somehow able to find that using just the last, those 9.
Yeah, that was just a question.
It's a bit of a difference between the customer and a experienced salesperson. So depending on the last 9, I think maybe, depending on the customer, of course, that we can get wrong input, even though we make it easier for them. I think it could make it harder for them.
Yeah, I agree, Martina.
Yeah,
I see your point.
Okay.
but also I have one question regarding all the scenarios, because this to me looked like a really large user story. So would it be better if this was each scenario was a user story and then we have a feature for the whole thing, or?
Oh, excellent question. Okay. Wait, in fact, because we took a story and we created 5, 10, 15 scenarios off of this, it's possible each of those scenarios is tiny. It's like an hour worth of work, in which case breaking the story up into 15 stories, now it just becomes a logistical issue, you know. Oh man, we got to keep 15 stories on our backlog. But if you look at the scenarios and you go, man, that looks like a tough one. Oh, that one's an easy one, and so forth. Now you can break it up into multiple stories. You already have the scenarios broken up, and you go, okay, it looks like we'll do these 5 for this story, and that'll be about a day's worth of work, and these 5 for this story, and that'll be a day's worth of work, and they're sort of related. Or maybe with the 2 stories, some people can be working on these scenarios and some can be working on that. But notice then, for every one of those stories, regardless of whether we break it into 2 or 15, we have the definition of done is passing that scenario. So it's literally, it's simply a logistic question of how big you want your stories. We have our stories with the appropriate doneness. Okay, do we have any other closing questions? And if not, I have a couple of questions for you.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How much time would you recommend spending on writing these acceptance criteria and details compared to how much time to actually do it? Because it seems like it's a lot of work to do it in this detail. So how can we do anything?
Well, let me ask this. If we don't do the detail now, when are you going to do the detail?
Yeah. So how much time, how many % of the time would you say should be spent on this?
Okay, that's a good question. All right, we spent about an hour on this story. And of course, it probably took a little longer because we had a few other associated things we talked about. I'm going to suggest, well, there's 2 parts to this. About an hour worth of work, and I think we covered all the scenarios. Okay, we didn't do that business rule. We haven't even touched that. Should we insure that or not business rule? Because that's a humongous thing. But we covered the scenarios in about an hour. I'm going to suggest this might represent a day's worth of work. Okay, maybe more, maybe less. So if it was taking us, and I'm going to say, what is the output of this? If we have 4 scenarios and they're easy to understand, maybe it might take a little bit less. It could be those 4 scenarios take a bit more. So I can't give you a hard and fast guideline, but I'm going to say, 1 to 5, okay, or 1 to 10. From the time it took you to create the scenarios versus the time to implement them or something. All right. If you've got an extremely complicated system that doesn't have anything to do, for example, if you didn't have your test double for your national database and you needed to create that new test double, that's going to be on an amount of time that it gets added to all of this. So it depends on how much infrastructure and testing infrastructure you already have. But to reach the second point, if I've got my 3 people, my triad I call them, and it's taking time to work on this story to get all those details, we got to gather the details sometime. Okay, I can't just go, developer, just go off and do this stuff. You understand what we want. To get to this level of details means that we have now, the developer has tests that they can run, a check they can run against to make sure that, yep, I've turned off my national database access, and yes, I'm getting the appropriate message. So the time spent in creating these represents time that would have been spent anyway in the development of them. And by doing it up front, you actually save time. Because wow, I need a little more detail, Martine. Oh, you're not available. Uh-oh. Okay. I'll just put this aside for half an hour. Okay. But if I can get Martine up front and go, yep, we got it all. We figured it all out. Oh, you got to get back to me 17 or 19. That's okay. That's a thing. But I can now start and working my stuff. And we don't get that, I'm going to call it delay, which is going to occur because I'm here, I don't have access, and then I go, for the next half hour, what do? I can't type anymore. Well, let me go off and play Pac-Man. Oh, good. Okay, and now I'll come back and so. The places, in fact, I'll give you another insurance company that I actually did my regular course with. And at the end of the course, in fact, I asked for feedback and the product owner said, oh man, I didn't realize what I was doing to my developers. I just give them this story and I expect for them to be able to figure out what I meant by it. So any other questions? I'll ship this to you so you'll have something that you can actually take a look at. Let me ask this. Was this useful? Did you gain something out of this? I didn't go through all of the background and the details of how we did this. I actually went directly into your stories. So was this
really
valuable?
Yeah, very valuable. Mm.
Okay. All right. Well, then, if there's nothing else, I thank you for your time. I appreciate your being on camera for that. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't realize they could have feedback like that in Teams. I know they did that in Zoom. So if you have any, I'll just say, if you have any follow-up question, feel free to write me. If it only takes a couple of minutes, no problem. If it's going to be another hour or two, have your MasterCard, Visa, or purchase order standing by. So, yeah. Thanks very much. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.